Welcome to Pitmaster, an Old Virginia Smoke podcast. I'm your host, Luke Darnell. While you're enjoying this podcast, please share it out on your social media. And also be sure to like the podcast on the service of your choice. This week we have Todd Johns from Plowboys, winner of the 2009 American Royal Invitational Championship, and has a very, very successful barbecue business, including a restaurant and rubs and sauces that we've all used. So please join me in welcoming Todd Johns. This podcast is brought to you by BarbecueData.com. BarbecueData.com is your one-stop shop for all of your barbecue competition data. Historical data, calls, wins, placements, everything under one roof. It's a great way not only to track yourself in the standings, but also to track how you improve your scores from year to year. Listeners of this podcast can receive 20% off of a new subscription to BarbecueData.com with the code PITPOD. That's one word, all capital letters, PITPOD, PITPOD. So check your team scores, check on others, and do it all on BarbecueData.com. All right, we're here today on the Pitmaster podcast with Todd Johns from Plowboys. How you doing, bud?
Good. How are you, man?
Good. And we were just talking briefly about how I was like, I don't know that we've ever met in person, but now that I see your face on here, I've seen you 1,000 times, guaranteed, but I don't think that we've ever officially met. So thanks for being on here.
Right. You run in better circles than I do, I think.
I don't know about that. I run in a lot of circles. I don't know if any of them are better or anything, but thanks for agreeing to be on here. You're one of the people that I've had on my list for a while, and you're I think one of the best stories out there.
Oh, thank you.
In terms of going from competition barbecue to having a successful business. And I think it's really just fascinating reading through your history and seeing how that all came about, because you did about 10 years in competition first before you started the restaurant. Is that correct?
We spent about 13 years in competition. And I would say probably half of that was, pretty serious. I never had the opportunity really to, and probably a talent to chase like team of the year and things like that. I always feel like that kind of stuff, it's as much about your talent as it is about your ability to chase that and put in the time. And I try to explain to people that are like, why don't you go out and win another contest or something? And I'm like, man, you got to know that it's something that has to consume your life. Anything you want to do well, you have to let it consume your life. And if I went back out and started competing, I couldn't just do it just to hang out. It would have to be like, I got to get serious. And then I don't have space for it, And so we had some good years, and now I got gray in my beard. My beard all had color at the time. But
restaurant will do that to a brother.
That's right. So no, we had some good years, and I look at like everyone competing now, and I think, gosh, did 20% of them even compete against me back in the day? Like so many new faces, and it's I was having this conversation with someone recently. It's so cool to see there were people having their time when we started, and there were people that I looked at and was like, oh, if we could ever be like them, that would be amazing. And then we had our time, and it was crazy to have people look at you and go, man, if we could have what they're having, it would be amazing. And now other people are having their time. And I just get to sit back and go, kid, you don't even know. It's cool. It's kind of just the evolution. And I think you see that in all kinds of sports, right? NASCAR drivers or basketball players or whatever. So it's cool.
Yeah, it is cool. And it's, this is our 10th year of competing now. So, we kind of started, I guess it would have been at the tail end when you guys were still hitting it pretty hard. And, we've kind of spanned through that phase of barbecue and all the television shows into this newer phase, and, the advent of information on the internet and the leveling of the playing field, as everyone likes to call it, which is a big deal.
Back when we started, like I like to say we were awful for like 7 years. It took us in our 7th year before we won a contest, and we would if we got top 5 in anything, we were just like celebrating. But what was different back then, I'm talking, we started in 2001. So from 2001 to 2005 or 6, there was no information out there, and everyone was tight-lipped. There was nobody sharing anything, no one mentoring, and there were no classes.
Yeah.
Now you win a contest, you have a class on Thursday. But there was no one sharing anything. And what really turned the corner for us was Mike and Debbie Davis. At the time, they were like the winningest thing you'd ever seen. And they had, 1 year they had like 19 reserve grand champions and 20 grand champions or some number. And no one had ever seen anything like that before. And, now we have Brad. We just watch what Brad does, and
right.
He wins everything. But so they did a class out in Lynchburg, and it was the first class that we had ever seen, like somebody really competitive and contemporary put on a class. And it was at the Jack Daniels. And so they were up on Barbecue Hill doing their class. And they said, we are not going to give you one recipe. We're going to give you our technique. And I mean, Tuffy Stone was there. Like, we felt like we weren't even in the right building, because it was like all of these at the time. Scotty Johnson was there, and he was killing it at the time. And Joe Amore, and people that don't compete anymore. And it was all these folks, and we were like, wow, if these guys are here just for a techniques class and no recipes, what does that tell you? There was no information being shared unless someone took you under their wing, and that very seldom happened. It was all trial and error. And now, you take a class, you can be competitive pretty quickly. And I don't think that's right or wrong. It's different.
Yeah, it's definitely different. I mean, I remember when I started back in 2012, just scouring that message board. I mean, any little thing that you could find, you were just like, oh my God, I can't believe, we got to try this now.
So the thing that I tell the story a lot, the thing that we learned that turned the corner for us was, so that the team was, and kind of still is whenever we do the American Royal stuff, it's my brother-in-law, Randy, and myself. And we would bring out everything. We had a 10 by 10 tent and a 10 by 20 tent. This was before anyone had trailers and RVs. And we would set up the 10 by 10, and that's what we would work under. And the 10 by 20 was for all the people that would come out and hang out.
Yeah.
Well, right there, you're not going to win anything if you're got a tent full of people. And what we saw Mike and Debbie was not their cooking process, but kind of how they set themselves up for success week after week. And they had their RV, which was untypical back then. And they had their smoker. And outside the RV was 2 chairs, 2 folding chairs. And that was it. They had nothing else set up. There might have been a spray bottle on the smoker or whatever, but there was nothing else there. And they talked about Mike would go to bed at 9:00. Debbie would Debbie would light the fire at midnight, and then she would go to bed. And then Mike would get up at 2, and the fire would be lit, and then he'd do his thing. It was a rhythm. It was rhythmic. And that's how you can do 30, 35, 45 contests in a year. We would do 8, and we were exhausted. And from that, we got rid of everything. We quit inviting people out. And all of a sudden that year, we took the class in March of 2007. September of 2007, we finally won our first contest. It took us 70 contests to win our first one. And then it was boom, 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 boom. And we had 3 like great years, but it took us just trimming everything away. And so then when I started running a trailer, and I had a little concession trailer and the big old black flamed thing, and I would set 2 chairs out. I would put the awning out. I drop the tongue, drop the jack, get the awning out, and I would set 2 chairs out there. And I would always say, I sit in one and no one ever comes to talk to me, so that one always sits empty. But I did it to remind myself, of Mike and Debbie putting their 2 chairs out, and that's it. And it was a kind of a reminder to me to keep things simple. You're here for a job. You're here to do what you came here to do. Don't be messing around with, potlucks and hosting these things. And that's all great. And we love those because we like to go to those, but that's not why I'm here. If I'm going to do a potluck, I'll just go rent a shelter at the park.
Right. That's why I love Thursday nights. I get all of that shit out of my system on Thursday nights, and it's, the hanging out and the having a few drinks, and, but that's a lesson that I had to learn. And it's funny, because Mike's a future guest on this podcast, hopefully. And, that whole 9:00 bedtime thing, I learned that from Mike Richter with Chick Swine and Bovine.
Yeah.
And he pulled me aside one night. He goes, "You know what? It's never going to work." I said, "What?" He goes, "You staying up till 1 a.m. drinking on a Friday night." He goes, "That will never ever work."
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it's great advice, and man, you're full of stories. This is awesome.
Yeah. Questions or not, we can just sit here and bullshit. It doesn't matter to me.
We really can. I mean, so 2007 was your first win, and then you win the Royal in 2009?
Yeah. So we always said, like I said, we were horrible, and nobody knew who we were. I mean, we would go to a dozen contests a year just around Kansas City, and we just kind of kept to ourselves. We weren't really outgoing people. We're just kind of introverted, and what do you do? Hey, I'm Todd. I mean, it's just not our personalities. And it was really the Barbecue Brethren where we got to meet people. And so we always said throughout the years, we'll go to the Royal when they invite us, which means we'll have won a contest and we get to the Invitational. It was just when we just didn't know a lot of people, and it seemed so expensive, and we weren't really good. So we weren't thinking we were going to win. So why go hang out with 500 teams you don't know really that well? And then it was the Barbecue Brethren. We started getting on there in 2006, and we started, interacting with people online before there was all Facebook and all this stuff. And all of a sudden we started meeting people virtually through the forums, Barbecue Forum and Barbecue Brethren. And in 2009, we said, screw it. We're not going to wait till we win one. We're just going to go this year and let's try it out. And so 2007 was our first year at the Royal. And literally 3 weeks before the Royal, it was after the cutoff for the Invitational, but 3 weeks before the Royal, we won our first contest. And I was like, well, I guess next year they're inviting us. And so we go and show up in 2008 at our very first Invitational, second time at the Royal. We had knocked out probably 4 GCs that year. So we were kind of on our way up. We were figuring some things out. And Andy Groneman cooked with me that year, and we got first in pork in the Invitational our very first time. And it was like, I don't know. I'm from Kansas City, so those trophies with the crown on top, it was like, to me, the most coveted thing. Like, oh my gosh, this would like make my entire career if I had one of those. It was such an aspiring, like, wishful thing. And then here I am. Can I cuss on this thing?
Absolutely.
So here I am fucking up there with some crown in my hand. And I mean, I can't tell you, I was just like, how did this happen? We were so terrible for so long. How did this happen? And it was just wonderful. And so I got a crown. Like, man, this is it. I'm done. Mike out. This is amazing. And so then the next year in 2009, I mean, that was our year, right? And so we end up getting, the Andy under our team name. He was cooking with me fairly regularly at the time and on his own, and he goes out and wins chest to chest. The same day I win butt to butt in Illinois. We rack up like, I don't think it was like 6 or 7 GCs that year, and a bunch, like, we are GC'd more than we GC'd. Like, we were always that like 1 point away kind of thing. And then we get to, and so in 2009, we racked all of our GCs up at the end of the year. We kept getting reserves. And so the cutoff was the 1st of August, and I'm at my last contest before the cutoff in Burlington, Kansas, and I won it. And Andy and I won it the year before, so it was back to back. And that's what got me at the Royal. And then all of a sudden after that contest, we banged out 4 of them and the Royal. And so
Wow.
on the backside of the year. So I almost didn't make the Invitational for 2009. It was the very last contest a week before the cutoff. I won one finally. And then we get to the Royal and so that year, not only did we win the overall, but we won brisket. And so, you're getting to the end, and we had a chicken call, a pork call, and it's just feeling good. And that was enough, right? It's like, man,
Right.
we just got 2 calls at our second Invitational, and it's like, man, this is great. Never did I think we'd get first in brisket, right? And so they calls for first in brisket, and it was kind of like, now it's like, wait a minute. I have 2 of these things. I have 2 of these crowns. Last year I was just blown away with 1, and so it hadn't hit me that maybe we could have won this. And so I'm standing there holding this brisket crown, and I'm thinking, then all of a sudden it hit me, shit, we might be top 3. This is, wow, we might get another crown. And then we ended up getting first. And man, even up to the very end, until they called Reserve Grand Champion, I thought, wow, we're 3rd. Oh, they just called Tuffy. Wow, we might be 2nd. So a long time ago, man. That was 13 years ago, but it's still a good memory, and it's still the highlight of everything that's happened for us. And even outside of competition, it's the highlight. I mean, a lot of things wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that. So I always have said I owe a lot to that walk across the dirt at the Royal. I owe a lot. I would give everything back but the trophy and the crown, But you can have the check back. I've made so much more than that.
No, I completely. We got our first Royal trophy last year.
Yeah, man.
And
I was there. I saw it.
It just gave me goosebumps just even talking about it. Like it's just something that you just never ever will forget. And you're right. I would trade every other trophy downstairs for that one. It's which is silly, right? Because we're adults and trophies. Yeah, it's funny. I tell people all the time, it's like when you're a kid, you want the trophy. When you're a teenager, you want the money. Screw the trophy. Then when you become a successful adult, it's like, damn the money. Just give me a cool trophy again.
Right. It's true. I'll take a plastic one, man. I don't care.
Just make sure it's cool. Well, we've talked about all this greatness stuff, but one of my favorite questions that I ask is, because I think it's a really good teaching moment for people to listen, is, do you have a favorite failure of yours during a competition where something went wrong or you did something wrong and that really set you up for success later?
Gosh, yeah, a lot of them. I mean, you do this thing long enough and there's lots of things that go wrong, and then what you learn from it is never give up, and so I think a classic one for me is we were cooking Big Creek Barbecue in Pleasant Hill, Missouri, and I always cooked on pellets, and so my son was entering his first kids Q competition. He was like almost 6. And so I was cooking with Andy, and he had chicken, I had ribs, he had pork, and I had brisket. And so I said, hey, ribs are on. They're all good. I'm going to go over and help Michael with his cook, and all's good. And Andy was the kind that never checked your shit for you either. Damn you, Andy. And I didn't check the pellet hopper. And so I get back from Kids Q and everything was great. And I'm like, this is so much fun. And why is that pit down to, And so what am I going to do? And so it was like 45 minutes left to turn in or something like that. And it needed like another hour and a half to cook. And you just can't, you can't turn a pellet cooker hot and fast. It wasn't a grill, and so it's kind of like,
Right.
man, what am I going to do? And Jeff Spurgeon was next to us, and he's like, hey man, I got a can over here. And this was before there was no gateways. This was before everyone. Yeah, this was the can. And so he's like, I got a can over here. It's got fresh coals, or he says about half good with coals. I just got finished with it. And so they picked it up and they brought it over to our site because we can't cook on their site.
Right.
So they brought the can over on our site and we put it in there. He's like, just wrap it up and keep flipping it. Keep turning and flipping, turning and flipping. And I'm like, man, these things better get done. And then his coals go out and we got about 30 minutes left or so. And all of a sudden, here comes Mark Grieco with another can. All right, man, I lit you a fresh batch of coals. This one's hot to go. And we're flipping. And we turned those things in. And I mean, it was crazy. And we turned them in. Well, the short version is we won ribs that day. And when they called pork pulling Plowboys for ribs, Jeff and Andy and Grieco and I were all standing together. We just lost it because we knew what a shit show it was. And here we won. And I mean, everybody has those stories where something went like catastrophe, right? Catastrophically wrong. And then you pull it out. And
Right.
Those are the best because it's like you earned it, but you didn't deserve it. And, this wasn't really a failure, but it was kind of became a mantra for us. And for me, I actually had it as a sign in my trailer above where I would make boxes and do all my work, like right there at eye level. I had something that said, never give up on the box. And I had it printed and mounted. And we were at the very first Sam's Club Invitational. They took the top 30 teams at the time and invited us down to Midwest City, and they did a pilot what then became the Sam's Club tournament. And man, you're there with you're one of 30 teams that's probably never finished last ever. We never, thank God, ever finished last, although we were terrible for a while. And you're thinking, and that was the talk, right? All of us are talking about one of us is going to go home the absolute loser today. And I think everyone was playing defense. It's like, I just don't want to be that guy. I hope I win, but I don't want to be last. Right. And I had my friend George Mullins come up from Texas and help me that weekend. And I said, George, I'm kind of off my game right now. And I just, if we could finish in the middle of the pack, I would feel really good. Cause this is like the most loaded. This is bigger than the Royal, because you don't get all 30 top teams together. There's always someone who's out.
Right.
And I said, God, if we could just finish in the middle. And we had a horrible cook. Horrible. I think I just felt too much pressure and nothing was working, and boxes. I just kept working the box, and we turned them in and we finished 14th. So we finished in the middle. We met our goal. Right. And to me, that was good. But George said afterwards, he said, man, you never gave up on the box. And so that became it, like for the next, what was that, 2009 or 10 or something like that? Like that became the mantra. That became the thing. And like, man, whatever's going wrong, don't give up on that box. Your cook could have been shitty, but you can maybe fix it in the box, and just don't give up. And can I tell one more story?
Sure, man. Yeah.
So this was like major catastrophe. And I heard Mo Cason at the National Barbecue Association this week tell almost the same story, that I burnt up a brisket. Like I had the pellet smokers going, loaded everything up, and I had a catastrophe where the pellet hopper loaded up and then I opened up the smoker and the inside was white.
Boy.
Ash. So everything was just black. And then it wasn't bark, it was coal, right? You could tap on it. It was like tink, tink, tink. And I'm like, holy cow, what am I going to do? And, we we took the brisket and kind of cut all the bark off because you couldn't even get through it. And then we just kind of put it in au jus and try to do whatever. Like the inside was okay because it almost like created a shell, like M&M or something.
Keep it like an M&M, yeah.
And so once we cut the shell out from around it, blah, 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 the GAB, the Great American Barbecue, which ended a long time ago, is usually like 160, 180 teams. We got 12th in brisket. And so, you don't give up, man. You don't give up on the box. And I think that's true with restaurants or whatever. Just, man, things could be going really, really shitty, but don't give up and it'll be okay. And you might not win, but you might get 12th place. Or you might get middle of the pack. Is better than losing.
You might not take yourself out of the game. That's the number one thing.
Yeah.
We had a situation a few weeks ago where we put the pork in the box and I could tell just by picking it up that it wasn't done. And I looked at the clock and it was 12:55 and I just started grabbing it and she was like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "It's going back on the cooker for 5 minutes. I got 5 minutes. I'm not giving up on this." And that's something that I've learned through this podcast is it's never too late. You still got time. You can do something in the box.
Yeah.
You mentioned a couple of things I want to go back to. You mentioned pressure. Like being at that inaugural Sam's Club pilot. What do you do, or what did you do in high pressure cooks like that? Because I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with, like how they manage themselves. What do you do in that type of situation to keep yourself grounded?
I let myself be nervous. So I kind of embraced the nerves. Saturday morning, I would have butterflies all morning. And I just felt like it was almost like fear kept me sharp. So it's almost like, when in the Avengers, when they ask, Banner, like, how do you keep from being angry? I'm always angry.
I'm always angry, right?
Like I'm always, how do you keep from getting nervous? I'm just always nervous. So I don't know. That was just kind of my thing. I just learned to embrace it. And I did a lot of theater in college and stuff. And so, you're nervous, but you still go out and do the job. And so I just learned to kind of work with those nerves. And I kind of embraced them and was like, if you're nervous, at least you're paying attention. Fear is a motivator sometimes.
I 100% agree with you. And it's not something that, I've ever thought about in terms of myself as cooking. So that's something that I'm going to have to come back and address because I think I've gotten away from that. And that might be, I was always intimidated too, right? I would see the guys, the Darren Worths that just made it seem so easy, the Rod Grays that made it seem so easy. And I was like, man, this is hard. I don't know how to do that, but I better be on my game because these guys know what they're doing, and so. Yeah, that's definitely, you just mentioned a couple of names that have been constants, through our hobby and just watching those guys cook, being next to them when they cook and seeing the mindset and seeing, that's been really instructive for me and just to see how they can go to that level mentally. So you mentioned pellet cookers. What pellet cookers were you using?
FE 100s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Those are great. And that leads me into some of my favorite questions, which are about gear and stuff. We all talk about smokers and stuff. Do you have tools or some purchase of $100 or less that has significantly impacted your competition barbecue life?
I just am not a barbecue gadget guy. I don't know. I just feel like all of it's like most of it's a gimmick. Like most of it's like something that some marketing person dreamed up that you really don't need. Like I've used Bear Paws once in my life and I was like, what the hell?
Throw them
Like,
away.
why do I need this? And I believe in remote, like fireboards, and I'm a fireboard lover, and they're made in Kansas City, so that probably is part of why. But something that I can do other things and be able to still cook. Like I got so many things going on. I can't just sit around and put a probe in something every 15 minutes. I want some alarm going off, and it's like pellets. I still tell people, because this was my reality back when I really started cooking more at home, and really started cooking a lot more in general. And what do you want to do? What they'll say, what should I get? I want to get a smoker. What should I get? And my first question is, well, what do you want to do? This isn't answering your question because I don't have a good answer for you. But
No.
but so I'll say, well, what do you want to do? What's your goal? Do you want to sit around a smoker and tend to fire and have this very romantic experience of a steel drum and a wood fire and meat and seasoning, and you're sitting there stoking the fire and drinking a beer and smoking a cigar, and you're there for 20 hours? Is that what you want? If so, I got a recommendation. And or do you want to cook every day? And you want to eat, smoked grilled food every day? If that's your goal, I got another option for you. And I always tell people, if you don't like pellets, just kind of get over yourself. I mean, I'm not going to debate one's better than the other. I'm going to debate, if you're a home cook and you want to cook, do something where, you're not in the driveway all Saturday long and you can't walk away. You're only going to do that a couple times a year. There's no space for us to do that anymore. No space of time.
Right.
But there is, I am not a barbecue snob. Never have been. I'll eat anything. I've eaten a lot of bad barbecue, and a lot of it was mine. And so, man, I'll enjoy anything. I am not a snob when it comes to barbecue at all. And so, man, if you like it and it's something you made and you're proud of it, and the people you're feeding like it, man, that's all that matters. And
Doesn't matter, right?
I just want people cooking more and buying Yardbird. But no, that's the only way. It's the only way this whole thing grows, is to get more people doing it. And you're not going to do it if all you have is a stick burner and no time to do it. If you're retired and that's what you want to do or whatever, that's great. You're going to do it. But most of the time, those smokers sit idle, unless you're competing or whatever. That's totally different. But if you're just a home cook, man, get something that you're going to cook on a lot, because you're putting a lot of money into it.
Yeah.
Too. So.
No, I agree 100%. It's the Traeger is the number one thing that gets lit at this house. I mean,
Yeah,
it's pretty much an everyday thing, whether I'm testing flavors for a contest or just making dinner.
right.
It's a lot easier than to press a button than to,
Right.
and I push people to that all the time, because you don't have time for the cleanup, you don't have time for being there, and now it'll tell you on your phone when it's done.
Right. So when I started cooking more, my kids were really, really young, and I was competing before, we had the boys. And so they were really young. I didn't want to be outside the whole time, not with my new kids. And so I always tell people, you go out, you push start, you make sure there's pellets in there.
Yeah.
And you push and clean, and you push start, you come back in, you prep your food. By the time you go back out, it's ready to go. Like, you want to cook every day, and that's the way to do it. So I always try to steer people toward pellets, not because I think it makes the best barbecue or not. I'm not even having that discussion. I'm just talking about, do you want to learn how to cook? Because 80% of it is did you cook it right? I don't care what your flavors are. Did you cook it right? You can learn that on anything. That's the part that's the hardest to learn, is did you cook it right? That's why you don't start with brisket.
Right.
You start with something that's easy. You start with a pork butt or a pork loin, and then maybe to a pork butt, and then maybe ribs, and then maybe brisket. So there's learning curves. You're not going to overcome that learning curve cooking 4 times a year in your driveway.
Right.
So that's my soapbox.
No, it's funny. It's the number one question. Well, how do I get better cooking brisket? Cook 100 more. It's always my answer. Cook 100 more. You'll get there eventually, but that just takes time and patience.
I'm going to steal that if you don't mind. I love
No.
that.
When you hear the word successful in terms of barbecue, and this is a tricky question because you've been the answer on this podcast to this question.
No.
When you hear the word successful in terms of barbecue, who's the first person who comes to mind?
Gosh, okay. So if it's business, I'm gonna have to give multiple answers. If it's
That's fine.
business, it's Famous Dave.
Oh yeah.
And when you know his history, his life story, and his full life story, and then you just see the success of what he's created with Famous Dave's and the founding that. I mean, and being a restaurant owner, I think we look at guys like Famous Dave. If it's retail products, I'm looking at Dave Raymond, who's Sweet Baby Ray's, and there is nobody who can touch the success of Sweet Baby Ray's except maybe Casey Masterpiece and so. But if you're talking competition, gosh, I would have given one name for a long time, and that would have been Darren Worth. And just because there's a lot of people that have won a lot of GCs, but Darren won a lot of GCs and won a lot of world championships.
Yeah.
And I've known Darren for a long, long time, back when he was smoking clones, back when he maybe had 1 or 2 GCs to his name, and he's an Iowa guy. I'm an Iowa guy, was an Iowa guy. And so I really hate giving him credit for anything. But Darren seems to me to be the guy that kind of did it first, where he's won all those world championships at every single stage. He's walked on every single major stage. Yep. And I think that's what sets him apart from a lot of people. But I think Brad Leininger is, he's at the top of the game for me right now. He's won on multiple big stages. He can pretty much go anywhere, and if he's not winning it, man, he's right behind you, and you better watch out if it's a 2-dayer, because he's got you the second day. So I think, that is not discrediting a lot of other people, and Joe Pierce and yourself and just a lot of people. But, I think, when they talk about Michael Jordan, they talk about rings, right? When they talk about Tom Brady, they talk about rings. Man, those are guys that got rings. And so speaking of, if I don't get you today, I'm going to get you tomorrow kind of thing. At the Royal 2007, maybe 2008, Mark Grieco, who most people probably don't know anymore, which is a shame, but 4 Men and a Pig, he got his ass handed to him in the Invitational, and I think it was 08 or 07. It was one of those 2 years. Got his ass handed to him. He was like third to last in the Invitational. And when we were coming up, there were 2 people that would win everything. It was the Joe Pierce and the Brads of the day. And when those 2 rolled up at the same contest, the rest of us were playing for third. I saw it happen many times where they were first and second. And it was Phil Hopkins, Smoking Guns, and Mark Grieco, 4 Men and a Pig. I mean, those guys could just roll in and just kill everybody. And so Grieco, the guy that could roll in and kill everybody, got his ass handed to him at the Royal in the Invitational. And he was pissed. And we all looked at each other and said, man, watch out for tomorrow. And he won the Open.
Wow.
And it was the only time I've ever seen somebody like will themselves to winning the next day at that stage, right? It's back-to-back world championships, and you got your ass handed to you in one, but you're going to will yourself to win the next one. And I just happened to be one of the guys that, was around when that was happening and saw, was there when he was looking at the score sheet, pissed off. And so those of us that, were hanging out that night, that's a story we like to tell, because I think all of us were like really impressed. Like, there's no way I'm doing that, but he did it, So
that's a great story, man.
It's fun to, these are all like long memories now. It's kind of fun. The trophies are somewhere, they're in a restaurant or whatever, but these things you carry with you every day. So you don't wear your ring every day, but you carry these things. It's kind of fun.
Absolutely. So when you were competing, did you have any habits or rituals or superstitions or anything that you had to do during a competition?
Not really. Not really. I mean, I would kind of stick to myself a little bit. I was often a one-person team. I always said I didn't play well with others, which kind of was true. And I didn't like, if you cooked with me, you were probably in my inner circle kind of a thing. Not because I was secretive or anything like that, but just, man, I didn't like the noise. It was hard for me to focus. And so if we've never cooked together, and, maybe even if you're an aspiring competitive cook, man, you're just going to ask me 1,000 questions, and I'm going to be too busy answering your questions and focusing on what I'm doing. And that burned me a few times. And man, if you want to come in the trailer and chat, that's cool. But you're not going to cook with me. I had a lot of people, man, if you ever need any help, I appreciate it, but I'd rather do everything myself and wash my own dishes than to have extra noise. And so there was probably 4 or 5 people I ever cooked with. And it just was, I was there to put 2 chairs out and do my job. And I wasn't there to feed people except the 6 judges. I wasn't there to entertain anybody. I wasn't there, And so, yeah, I don't know if I had any rituals or anything. I would usually kind of the most relaxing part of a contest for me was Friday night. I would go out and visit, but if it was just kind of a regular weekend contest, I would just go in my trailer. I had Sirius XM in my trailer, and I would turn on BB King, Bluesville, and just run blues. So Friday night was blues music. And then Saturday was, like Beastie Boys and AC/DC and just kind of classic stuff and, stuff I grew up on. And that was kind of Saturday, just to kind of get juices flowing. And I would just kind of hang out. And some nights on Friday night, I just bring up I bring a DVD or something and watch a movie on Friday night just by myself and just kind of have some downtime. It's kind of like, going to bed at 9 or whatever. I would try to like have some downtime because I know tomorrow's going to be insane. And I know by the time I got to drive home, I'm going to be exhausted. So I tried not to, and I very seldom drank, very seldom. So.
Yeah, no, that's getting that downtime on Friday is a big part of my ritual. I don't have to go to bed at 9, but I need to be in the rack at 9, whether I'm reading a book or listening to a podcast or doing something.
Yeah.
That's a big, important thing. And you stole my music question. That's good stuff though. Like my Friday music is generally the stuff that my wife doesn't like because she normally doesn't show up till Friday night. So Led Zeppelin, Beatles, things like that
Yep. Yep.
she had enough of growing up. She's like, no. And I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
that's my Friday jams then.
Yeah. Yeah. I like blues music because it really, it was so broad and eclectic. It wasn't the top 40 stuff you've heard a million and a half times. And so I would sit and kind of get exposed to maybe some new stuff I hadn't heard. And so it was
Yeah.
just kind of an enjoyable way to spend Friday night. On Saturday, music was just to put you in a zone and in a mood and in a focus. And so, yeah,
That's
I
cool.
always liked, my trailer was, just kind of set up the way I like to work. And I think a lot of cooks are like this, like, you just understand the flow of your setup, whether it's under a tent or whether it's kind of partially in a trailer on a deck with it under an awning. You just kind of set up your same flow every time. And I think that's really important because I came from IT and, when you're troubleshooting something, you don't just start from scratch and, like when you're developing a recipe, you don't go, well, that isn't quite right. I'm going to do something completely different.
Right.
You take one thing out, and you kind of, make things really simplistic and so if something's working, you want to keep the things that are working and shed the things that aren't. And so my environment was kind of like that, where, hey, this flow is working for me. This tool where I place things, I'm now getting ready to trim chicken. So this is going to be here and that's going to be there, so that my movements were all kind of like familiar. Otherwise, you're just making it up every time you go to do this. And
Yeah.
I wanted to have the same rhythms, the same music, the same setup, and not just have something completely different week after week. So I think that's really a key for success, is figuring out what works for you and then do that every single time, so that your movements are familiar and your timings are familiar and constant. Because if you're going to be successful and do this 40 times and not kill yourself, you kind of have to have that. And one of the things that really helped me was trimming things. I would almost test, like, okay, my ribs are 11 steps. What if I take one out? Oh, guess what? That didn't matter. I'm not going to do that anymore.
Right.
Instead of, I got to the point where I quit wrapping. I quit using apple juice. I would spritz with water and not wrap, which was totally different than what everyone else was doing. But I was a one-person team. And my philosophy was, I can do these 5 steps better than I can do the 11, right? I can make sure those 5 steps get done right every single time versus having 11 to do. So the more I could cut out, the better. And that included the stuff I was bringing to the contest. It wasn't even just the cooking process. It was like, what if I got rid of one of my 2 chairs? Or what if I got rid of, like, that's an extra step now that I can get rid of and focus on something else. I can take that same energy and put it into making sure the brisket's done right or whatever. So I tended to try and do less than more, make things simpler than more complex. And that really helped, especially when you're a one-person team.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. So another thing that I always say, and it's from this podcast, is it's always better to take something away than it is to add something. So
yeah.
Generally going to make a better product. Well, man, for 2 guys that have never met before, we certainly did a good job. Let's get into these rapid fire questions here before we wrap up.
All right.
What do you see about barbecue on social media that upsets or bothers you?
Well, I think I just went off about it about 2 weeks ago, and that's when someone says, as a restaurateur, and this is not just barbecue, it could be Italian food, right? Oh, I could do a better brisket in my backyard. And I just want to say, well, of course you can. So can I. But you're not doing 100. You're not doing it 7 days a week. You're not doing it 363 days a year or 362 days a year. Like, come on, man. Like, of course you can. You want to go mano y mano? Like, you want me to bring a brisket to your backyard and I'll cook beside you? It's like, come on. I think, yeah, that stuff gets my goat every time. But it doesn't. Like, I get it, and it's fine. It doesn't bother me. I just want to have the conversation. I want to take that person and just shake him and go, "Do you realize how ridiculous you sound?"
Right.
You know, it doesn't make me upset. It just, I think it's more comical than anything. And you know, if you're in this business, you generate a pretty thick skin to things
Pretty quickly.
pretty quickly. So that's one thing that I you know, as a restaurant owner, it's like, well, of course you can cook a better brisket at home. You're doing one, and you got nothing
Right.
else to do.
Do you have a favorite pre, during, or post competition meal?
No, not really. Not really.
Okay.
No, I didn't have traditions like a lot of people do that way.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite present that you
Oh,
like to give to people?
wait.
Oh,
No. I did for the longest time. I would bring Pringles, and Pringles were like, I would bring a couple tubes of different flavored Pringles and just kind of like have different ones each time. I kind of get in a Pringle kick for quite a while.
see, that's
Yeah, I
important.
forgot about that.
That's
It's
definitely better than Donnie Teal's Tijuana Mama sausages from the gas station. So gross. Um, what do you have a favorite present that you like to give to people?
you know, a 3-pack of my rubs and sauces, you know, and because I think it's a nice, you know, it's a personal gift. It's from me,
Sure.
and
Yeah,
and you know, so yeah, I like, yeah, that's it.
that's awesome. All right, last question. If you could have a gigantic billboard anywhere with anything on it, getting a message out to millions of people, what would it say and why?
Um, Other than don't give up on the box, which wouldn't resonate with anybody except competition people. You know, I would say, I would say that we're better off for all that we let in, and that, you know, uh, we just need so much more kindness in this world, in this country, and we just need some damn kindness. And um, I spend time with people that have like beliefs and opinions and things that I do, and I spend a lot of time with people that are exact opposite. And they're as much brothers to me as those that agree. And I just think, man, we don't have to agree on stuff to be brothers and sisters in this thing, you know, especially like barbecue people, man. We're just so, it's just a special community. And so, I don't know, we're just better off for the things we let in versus, you know, keeping things out. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So,
100%, man. 100%. I 100% agree. More kindness would go a
mhm.
long way.
Long way, long way.
Well, Todd, tell people where they can find you, whether it's online or in person, and your products. And man, I've really had a great time talking with you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, me too. We'll have to meet in person someday.
Absolutely. Next time I'm in Kansas City,
All right, sounds good.
I'll make it a point.
Well, we've got restaurants in Kansas City at 12th and Main downtown, and then Blue Springs on the east side of town. We've been there 8.5 years, downtown 7 years, and then we've been at Arrowhead Stadium, 4 concession stands. We were the exclusive barbecue of Arrowhead last year, and so that's where you can see us. And then, you know, we're just do a Google search and you can find us, Amazon, everywhere. We don't sell anything direct except in the restaurants. Like, everything's through retailers. That was a strategy long ago. Yardbird just turned 15 years old
Wow.
in January. And so when I first made that, in January of '07, like '07 was like just a big origin year for us or something. It's crazy all the things that happened that year. But I did the math and I was like, if I sell 425 shakers this year, I'll break even. Now we do over 100,000 just a year,
Wow.
right?
That's good.
100,000
Yeah.
pounds a year. So, So yeah, so you can find us at all kinds of retailers. We're in 20 countries, 3 continents, and that's just the 20 countries we know of. Some of them that blow me away are like Tasmania, New Caledonia, which is a French island off of Australia, New Zealand, so all that Australia area is a big market for barbecue. And we're fortunate to be one of the people that are in that market. And then Amman, Jordan, we found out there's a barbecue retailer that has a bunch of us kind of common top brands over in Amman, Jordan, of all places.
That's awesome.
And Dominican Republic. And so this little competition team that sucked for so long all of a sudden has, our products and logo and brand and name in other parts of the world. It's crazy. But it's been so much fun. 21 years of this, we've been doing this. So
that's why you're the answer to that question sometimes.
I don't know about that.
Well, Todd, thanks a lot, man. I really appreciate it.
All right. You bet. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. Thank you for listening to Pitmaster, an Old Virginia Smoke podcast. Be sure to subscribe and like the podcast, rate the podcast, and to share it out with your friends. Also, be sure to check out the Old Virginia Smoke TikTok as well. Old Virginia Smoke, one word. That's all you have to search for. It's hilarious. Tune in next week for another great episode of Pitmaster. For companies interested in advertising, please contact Old Virginia Smoke directly via www.oldvirginiasmoke.com. Pitmaster, an Old Virginia Smoke podcast, is edited by Chris Sedanka. Pitmaster, an Old Virginia Smoke podcast, is a property of Old Virginia Smoke LLC. All rights reserved. Copyright 2022.